Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We are excited at American Innovations to lead today's discussion on turning compliance data into actionable information with PCS. I'll kick off the discussion with just a few introductory slides and then dive right into our live demo, and we'll wrap up with a QA session. I know this is scheduled during lunch for a lot of you guys, so I don't anticipate this is going to take the full hour. For those of you newer to PCS, I'm David Gaucher, formerly a technical support representative and compliance data specialist, and now a software product manager for PCS and survey manager. And I'm joined by my lovely assistant, Christopher Shahan, Director of Product Management, and my boss. Here at American Innovations, Christopher and I, along with the rest of our product team, are passionate about helping you achieve your goals with protecting and managing our energy infrastructure. We do that by aligning our products and professional services around your activities. For today's discussion, we're focusing on inspection and maintenance linking, as well as a couple calculated user-defined fields that help give you insight into scheduling maintenance items. You'll notice that when we switch to PCS, it's going to look a little bit different than the one you guys currently have. This is because we're going to be using PCS 2.0 for the demo, and one of the enhancements that we made was a complete refresh of the look of the application. We did this to align the user interface with the rest of our products, as well as to incorporate, as we incorporate more applications in our portfolio. It's important that the look and feel of the applications are similar, so you don't have to relearn how to use an application starting from scratch. One of the actually added benefits that we got from doing this UI refresh is a performance increase, because the buttons that we used were pictures, and then they switched to a font. So actually the load time is just a little bit faster. If you're familiar with PCS, if you use it a lot, you'll probably notice a difference. So without further ado, let's dig into our live demo. So what we're looking at here, you can kind of see some of the UI refresh here. Some of the contrast is different. It's a little bit easier to see. The buttons, for the most part, are all in exactly the same spots. But what we're really going to be focusing on today is one of the additional improvements that we made in 2.0, and that's around inspection and maintenance linking. So let's just kind of take a step back and talk about the way that inspection records and maintenance records have historically been used. If we go to our inspection tab, there's a couple fields that we've had in version 7 even that give you some insight into the status of your maintenance items. That's the maintenance details column and the pending maintenance column. So with looking at these three records right here, I have a few different states of my maintenance items. The bottom one here, there is a maintenance item that is associated with this inspection, but it didn't occur on exactly the same day as my inspection date. So PCS can't even pick up that there is a maintenance item associated with that inspection. I have no clue that there's an outstanding maintenance item that needs to be completed because that inspection date doesn't match my repair found date. Whenever the inspection date does match the repair found date, you get a little bit more information in the maintenance details column. We can see the repair code. So this one is a riser repair, and this one actually was completed. So we can see that the date that the repair was completed. The one above is actually still open, but we don't know if it's just been found or if it's initiated, because all it says is pending. It doesn't give us a lot of insight into the status of our maintenance item. We also had this other column called pending maintenance, which really just gives you a count of the total number of maintenance items that you have at that particular site. So as those maintenance items get closed, the pending maintenance column would update and hopefully go back to being blank like these guys, so you don't have any pending maintenance. So it's great to have some context, but this doesn't really do a great job of painting an entire picture of what's going on with your site at any given time. And really that's the actionable data that we're trying to unlock by linking our inspection and maintenance records. We kind of do it with our information and inspection records, how every inspection is tied to an information record, and we pick up, as our activates change, if we have a new crossing, we can see all inspections in the future. And we're now going to require that foreign pipe to soil or foreign IRF are going to be available and required for any inspections that occur after that inspection information record. But we don't do a great job of bringing in your maintenance items to really complete that picture. And it's very important that we do that, because you guys are required to not only take inspections, but to actively maintain your pipelines. And you need to have verifiable proof that maintenance is occurring. So we need to know not only what the state is as far as information goes, we need to know our inspection records as far as their compliance due dates, and we're staying on track and taking the correct number of inspections that we need to. And we also need to be able to see when we have problems, where they came from, what's the problem, and when they'll be fixed. So the solution that we are providing for you guys in PCS 2.0 is actually linking our inspection records to maintenance records. And some of you might have noticed here at the bottom left corner, there's a new tab that's called Atmospheric Maintenance Links. If I double click that guy and go to an inspection record with a linked maintenance record, I can see in this mini grid here all of the information that is associated with the linked maintenance record. It's not just a vague status about when it's pending. I can see actually every single field when it's found, any priority that I've assigned to it. I even have a new maintenance status column that shows me if it's initiated or if it's started or if it's completed. I can see my repair code and any user-defined fields that I've created. This is really to give you guys more context into what's going on with your sites. You can also see here that I have a couple fields that probably don't look familiar, but they look like they could be helpful. It's a repair due date and a days until repair due. So we can see that because these cells are grayed out, they're calculated. And these are actually calculated user-defined fields that I built to help me know when I need to fix a particular maintenance item. These repair due dates are actually based on, well, they're based on a few things actually. The most important factor is the priority. So I have a repair priority pick list that I've already built. high, medium, low, and not applicable. And based on what I choose in this column, my repair due date is going to update. Days until repair due. This one is actually just taking my repair due date and checking it against today's date so I can see how many days I have until that repair is coming due. And really where these rules are coming from would be your O&M manual. In your O&M manual, if you say, you know, I need to have, if my priority is high or critical or whatever you guys call your priority, you need to get it done within a month. Otherwise, if it's, you know, medium or some sort of moderate priority, it's not as critical that it gets done immediately. That can be done within a year. I mean, we're talking atmospherics here. So remember that our inspections occur on a 3-year cycle. May be different for different facility types. Like our test points are to be read every year. So the moderate priority may need to be done a little bit sooner, depending on the facility type. If it's a low priority, really, I don't care when it gets done. I just need it to be done before I take my next inspection. And then if it's not applicable, there's no schedule associated with it. So we'll dig into how to build these calculated UDFs. It's going to get kind of complicated pretty quick, but I'll do my best to break it down for you into all the individual pieces so that you have a good understanding. And I'll also be sharing the PowerPoint that I have with you guys just as a reference, so you can always look back at the calculation that I set up and build your own calculation based on the one that I have kind of as a template. Before we leave PCS though, we have another new field called linked maintenance count. And you might wonder why a count of maintenance items is important, you know, especially if we live in the transmission world where I have a test point. If there's something wrong with the test point, I'm going to create a maintenance item. And there's kind of a one-to-one relationship there between your inspections and your maintenance. Where this really comes into play is depending on how you design your system in PCS. So typically we see the count becoming important for our atmospherics and our leak survey customers. The reason is that if we take the atmospheric as an example, let's say I'm at a tank farm and I have 20 tanks. I don't want to, in PCS, create every single little feature about each tank and have to inspect that every 3 years. That would be a crazy number of facilities and a lot of inspections to maintain. What I might do instead is group those facilities into higher level buckets, which could be I treat each individual tank and all of the piping associated with it, the coating of the tank itself, the containment, anything I'm inspecting on that particular tank, I treat that as one facility. Or I could break that into an even higher bucket and say, I have 16 tanks. These 4 tanks in my northeast quadrant, I'm going to consider one facility. The 4 tanks in the southeast quadrant, I'm going to consider another, and then so on for southwest and northwest. So now I only have 4 facilities, but each of those facilities is actually comprised of a lot of atmospheric locations that I need to inspect. For that reason, I may have multiple maintenance items tied back to that one aggregated facility in PCS. So really, it just depends on how you've designed PCS, how you've set up your atmospheric module to know if this linked maintenance count field is going to be important to you. The example I gave about leak survey, typically we see when you're walking up down the service line up to a bank of meters, you could have multiple meters. And you may want to treat those as one facility just to say that everything about them is good. So I don't have to go in and check each serial number and make sure I'm adding exactly the correct serial number, or rather assigning an inspection to the correct serial number or maintenance item to the correct serial number. I may just want to have a generic bucket that says, if there's anything wrong, I need to check these 2 or 3 meters. That's really the cases where this linked maintenance count really becomes important. So I guess if we take a step back here, one of the things that I didn't mention is how we're linking these records. I mentioned historically that in order for you to be able to see your maintenance information on the inspection tab, the inspection date has to match your repair found date exactly, and if it doesn't, it won't link. So what we're doing now is actually tying those records to an Allegro survey. So if I'm going to do an inspection survey for my atmospherics, and I'm out there, gathering all of my inspections, if I come across something that needs to have a maintenance item created, and I create that on the same site on the Allegro, when I bring that survey back into PCS is going to see that you have an inspection record and a maintenance record on the same site, and it's going to link those records for you. Doesn't matter if the dates are different. Like we can see, for example, in my main grid here, I have an inspection date of May 26th of this year for my inspection. But if we look down at the maintenance item, it actually happened 2 days later. This is just an example. I know a lot of you have actually written into your policies and processes that the inspection date and the repair found date have to link, because you can't glean that information from the inspection tab or include those inspection fields on your reports if those dates don't match. So this gives you a lot more flexibility as far as when you're going to link these records. The converse also applies. So if we're talking about open maintenance surveys, those are those surveys where you're only going out to fix problems. You should also be taking a follow-up inspection. So that kind of completes the whole story there. You go out in the field, you took an inspection, there was a problem with the site, you documented the problem, the problem was initiated and eventually completed, and then you take a follow-up inspection that shows that the problem is complete. With atmospherics, probably you're going to be taking pictures to prove that the problem is complete. This is the initial inspection here, so you can see we have some pretty severe pitting. I would expect that, if this section of pipe were replaced, once it's replaced, you would take a picture of the completed repair so that you have that for your records. But when you're bringing these inspections and open maintenance back into PCS, we're also linking that subsequent inspection to your maintenance item. So there's kind of like a chain of custody almost between when you're finding a problem, what it was wrong, and when it was fixed, and the proof that it actually was fixed. Okay, so in a nutshell, that is inspection and maintenance linking. Let's talk about how we can generate this repair due date for you guys to use in your own PCS systems. So I'm just going to flip back to my PowerPoint presentation. And just going to kind of start by running through some best practices for building calculated UDFs. For those of you that aren't admin, when I'm saying, I know I've said UDF a lot, what a UDF is a user-defined field. And really what that gives you is the capability to create any column to store whatever data that you need that by default PCS isn't tracking. An example of that is this repair due date. For your atmospherics, you may want to break them down by atmospheric facility type and then look for specific things based on the facility type. So the things that I'm looking for at a soil-to-air interface are going to be different from what I'm looking for at a pipe support, which are different from what I'm looking for at a valve, for example, or a tank. So you can build all of these user-defined fields to track whichever data items that you need to and keep them segregated so that you're not overloading the same field with data that is hard to query or report on. When we're talking about calculated UDFs, there are a couple ways to build them. On the left here, that's what we call basic mode. And it's a very simple way to build calculated UDFs where it's just a basic equation. If I wanted to take my repair found date and tack on 30 days, I could say repair found date plus 30 and hit save, and I would be done. So it's very easy to build these UDFs with basic mode, but it doesn't give you a lot of the flexibility that we need to account for all of the different cases that we're going to run into. So that's where advanced mode comes in. And if you look at the far right with all the operators, there's a lot more options that you can use, but you also have to know the syntax so that you don't get errors. If you're getting errors, it's not going to let you hit the save button and you won't be able to get out of that calculated UDF editor window. Some pro tips here. So the first one is write out your calculation in plain English. What I mean by this is if you know the rules that you have and you know that you need to include some logic there, then you should be able to write it down in plain English so that you're able to document all of the cases that you're going to run into. And I think this one will make a little more sense once we actually dig into the meat of this calculation, because I did write them out in plain English so that you could actually understand what's going on. Another one is using if statements versus I case statements. So these are kind of similar, but they're also kind of different. So an if statement says if some expression that resolves to true or false, do the true thing or the false thing. So what I mean by that is like an example of a Boolean expression, which Boolean is just a fancy word for true or false, would be like structure pipe to soil is less than or equal to -850. So anytime you have a structure pipe to soil reading, that's either going to return with a true value or a false value. Either it is less than or equal to -850 or it's not. And we want to do something if it resolves to true, and we want to do something else if it resolves to false. So in its most basic state, if we just said this is a checkbox field, we would say if structure pipe to soil is less than or equal to -850, if it is more negative, then we want to check the box. If it's not more negative, we want to have the box unchecked. That's kind of the gist of an if statement. An I case statement is very similar, but it's kind of like a bunch of if statements that are all thrown together. So I have my first thing that I'm evaluating, and then the thing that the result of that thing, and then I have the second thing that I'm evaluating and the result of that thing, and so on for as many cases as you want to evaluate until you get to the end where you have, if it doesn't meet any of those, then do this one thing. An example of this would be if I'm checking my test point against multiple criteria. I might want to check it against my 850 on criteria first, and then my 850 off, and then 100 millivolt shift. And if it doesn't meet any of those, then I want my box to be unchecked. So really, we recommend that you use this I case statement anytime that you need to do multiple evaluations in the same expression. It's going to give you a little bit better performance. I think it makes it a little bit easier to write. But definitely, use the iCase if you need to look at multiple things. Another thing we need to do is check for null values. What a null is, it's an empty field. So if we're talking about our structure pipe to soil example, what I'm looking for where structure pipe to soil is less than or equal to -850, that calculation might break if there's not a number in that cell, because it doesn't know how to treat it when it's completely blank. It's not that it's just empty. It's not that there's nothing there. It doesn't understand how to take that and translate that in and compare nothing to a less than or equal to value. So you always want to check for nulls, and you always want to check for nulls in the very beginning of your if statements and your iCase statements, so that if it hits that null, it can see it and then spit out the correct result. If you don't check for nulls, you could build a calculation expression that's going to cause errors. So as a component of that, we always recommend that you build your calculated user-defined fields in your test environment first. We do have in the calculation expression editor a way to validate your expression, but it's only validating to make sure that the syntax is correct and that it could potentially work. It doesn't actually look at all of your data and say, okay, I've checked all of the cases where I have all of these different structure pipe to soils and they're good to go. This calculation is going to work every single time. So, just be really careful, build them in a test environment to make sure that they work, and then copy it over to your production environment. Another pro tip that we have is how to return today's date. So if I have a calculated user-defined field and it's a date type, I can put in this # with today in curly brackets, and that UDF is going to spit out today's date. We're actually going to use this function in our calculation to get my days until repair due field populated. The last one I have here is how do you set a date to a blank value? So this is going to become important really quick for the repair due date calculation, because you're going to find that because of our business rules, there are going to be times where we want to assign our due date to a blank value. But we can't say in the calculation expression, set my date to null, because SQL doesn't work that way. You can't assign a date to a null value. So we're going to kind of hack the system a little bit and trick it into assigning it to a null value. Okay, so these are the rules that I have. And let's just say this comes from your O&M. Actually, I need to give props to an unnamed customer, because this idea or this repair calculated due date came from this person who will remain nameless. But thank you for the idea. I think it's a great example that applies to really all of our customers. So what we're looking at here is a table that has my repair priority pick list. I have my high, my medium, my low, am I not applicable? And then I have, just in normal words, what needs to happen as far as when the maintenance items assigned to those repair priorities need to be scheduled. So if it's not applicable, I don't have a due date assigned. If it's a high repair, it needs to be fixed within 30 days. If it's a medium repair, I want to do it within a year. And then for a low repair, I want to do it before the next inspection. But the next inspection, the way that we're going to build this, it's kind of tricky, because the next inspection could change. For example, when I go out and I find my repair or find my maintenance item, I have an inspection, I have a maintenance item. Let's just say that the inspection date and the repair found date are the same day. And then the way that the calculation is set up, it's going to schedule it to be before the next due date of that particular site, the next due date as far as inspections are concerned. What happens if I take another inspection in a year? That's going to change my due date for my repair item based on the new inspection date. So we have to account for where multiple inspections occur. We need to, and we'll look for that case here when we start to flesh out this example. All right. So at the top here, I wrote out my calculation in just plain text. So the first thing that we're going to do always is check for nulls. So if my repair found date is empty, which means is it null, or if my priority is not applicable, then my repair due date should be blank. If I don't, when I say if repair found date is empty, what that means is if there is no repair to be had, if there's no record, it is going to spit out a blank value. And it seems like, why would you really need to account for that case? But this is just one of those examples where you need to check for nulls, even in places where you don't expect them, just to account for any case that field could be, so that it's always returning the correct value and your expression isn't going to throw any errors. So the calculation is just below here. We're using an is null function, which looks at the repair found date field. And if it is null, it spits out a true value. If it's not null, then it goes to the repair priority field and says, are you not applicable? If either of those are true, if repair found date is null or repair priority is not applicable, then I'm going to return a field called null date. And this is that kind of hack that I was talking about. We can't assign my repair due date to a null value, but what I can do is create another calculated user-defined field of a date type and not put any calculation in it. And what that does is it creates a date field that is blank. So that completes the calculation, and the data types are the same as far as my due date calculation and my null date calculation, and it's just going to populate that repair due date field with a blank value. I'll show you guys the calculation for that here once we get to the end of the repair due date calculation. All right. The calculations for where my repair priority is high and medium are very similar. So I wrote them out in plain English. If my repair priority is high, then my due date should be scheduled for 30 days after when my repair was found, or my repair found date. And then medium, really similar. If it's medium, it should be scheduled for 1 year after my repair found date. And you can see the calculations below, where I'm looking to see if it's high, the priority is equal to high. Then I'm using a function called add days, where the first argument of the function is where that 30 is. That's an argument. So the first argument is the number of days I want to add, and the second argument is the date that I want to add it to. In this case, I want it to be added to my repair found date. For repair priority equal to medium, I'm going to use an add years function, which is really similar in syntax to add days, except it's just going to add years. So I'm going to add 1 year to my repair found date to get my calculated repair due date for each of these cases. The last one gets more complex, because when we look at the business rules for a low priority, we're saying that it needs to happen before the next inspection. So we need to account for, we really need to solidify what that next inspection date is, so that it's set in stone, and if we have more inspections, we can show that that repair is actually past due. So in plain English, if the repair priority is assigned to low, the first thing that we have to do is make sure that another inspection hasn't already been recorded, because that would push our date out. If one has been recorded, then we need to mark it as past due, if you will. And I think it makes sense in this in the calculation expression here, the logic that we're stepping through to get to that. I'll explain it if it doesn't. If there hasn't been another inspection after the initial one where the maintenance item was found, then we're just going to tack on 3 years because that's when my next inspection would be due. So in our IK statement, we're checking if the repair priority is equal to low. And then instead of spitting out just, hey, take my date and add 30 days or 1 year or 3 years in this case, we're actually going to have another if statement. So the first thing that we're checking for in this if statement is if my repair found date is my repair found date plus one days essentially is less than my last inspection date. What that means is the assumption is that your repair found date and your last inspection date are going to be the same. So I couldn't say if my repair found date is less than or equal to my last inspection date because that wouldn't account for where I had a subsequent inspection that occurred after my repair found date. So by setting it 1 day in the future, I can check to see if an inspection has occurred a month or a year or 2 years after that repair was found. And if there was a subsequent inspection, then I'm assigning the due date for that repair item to be my last inspection date. In other words, my inspection already occurred. My O&M says I'm supposed to fix this thing before my next inspection, so you're past due. And the last inspection date is that due date that you missed. If the repair found date plus one is the same or greater than, so it occurred after your last inspection date or the same day as your last inspection date, then we're just going to follow what our O&M says and tack on 3 years to align with the atmospheric schedule that we're using. When we bring that all together, we get this super complicated, calculated user-defined field. So this is actually why I want to share the PowerPoint with you guys. I don't expect you to be over there writing it down or taking a bunch of screenshots to make sure that you have this recorded. And, you know, bear in mind that the reason that this is set up the way that it is based on the business rules that we started with. So if your O&M is different than what I'm using, then you would need to tweak the calculation. Like if my priority is A, B, and C, I couldn't use repair priority is equal to high, medium, and low. I have to change it that way. And then you would also need to make sure that the dates that you're using line up with your O&M. This calculation is also designed specifically for atmospheric facilities, so it won't work for test points. So we would also need to go in and add probably a check to look for facility type to see what that is, and then run through the calculation to get you an accurate representation of when your repair due date calculation would be. You can see there's actually some things that I didn't include in the previous slides. If we're taking it from the top to the bottom, I have an if statement. The first thing in the if statement is if is null repair corrected date, which means if I have a maintenance item that has a repair corrected date populated, then there's no due date because it's already been finished. If that's not true, then it goes through my IK statement, which is my multiple if statements that are looking to see if we have a maintenance item, if so, what's the priority? Okay, do this thing based on the priority, and so on. And then at the very end, I have this else clause where if nothing applies, we just want to assign it to that null date. One of the other columns that I had in that linked maintenance mini grid in PCS was a days until repair due. And this is the calculation for that days until repair due. I also included where you should build that UDF, just so it's pretty clear. We have a really simple if statement here that says, if I don't have a due date, or if it's empty, then I want to return a null value. Otherwise, I want to take my repair due date, subtract today's date, and then take 1 day off. The reason we take 1 day off is because it counts today as a day, and it really makes your year 366 days, so we have to take that extra day off there. So now that we're taking this data, we're really making it actionable by applying these rules, figuring out exactly when our maintenance items are due. What do we do with that once we have it? So there's a couple things you can do. You can use these to create custom email notification reports, and you can do these with logic and create them with different frequencies. So for example, at the beginning of the month, I may have a repair due date report that gets automatically sent out to all of my technicians with all of the open maintenance items that they have. And if I could also have another report that says if I have a repair due date that's due in the next 2 weeks, then I want to send another email with only those ones that are due within the next 2 weeks to my technician. But not only to the technician, we're also going to send it to their boss. So there's insight, their boss knows they have to peel off and get this maintenance item resolved. And they're also making sure that you're staying on top of, you know, what you're calling out as far as what you're doing for remedial action. If it's due within, 7 days, you could increase the frequency and send that report every single day to the technician supervisor, and then the supervisor's supervisor. So there's a lot of eyes on it, and it really becomes a priority to get that knocked out. Another thing that we can do with this data is integrate with other systems. So I know a lot of you guys use work order management systems. This calculated due date field can be created in PCS and then included in your bridge exports, either to a file or export to table, to send that due date to the other system, which may not really know when it's due. It just knows that it has a maintenance item. And then you would, use that in your other system to make sure it gets completed on time, completed in your other system, and you could bring that data back so that PCS is updated and you can take a follow-up inspection. That's it. I know it was kind of technical, really quick. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. Open the floor to any questions that you guys have now. Okay, so the first question we have is the repair due date just in the maintenance grid, or will it work/override my schedule if I'm using target month/year? So that's a great question. I had intended to mention that before, but part of the reason that we have to use user-defined fields here is because our scheduling engine is solely focused on making sure that your inspections are being recorded. So we're actually not even looking at maintenance items. So it won't impact your inspection schedule as far as target month or year. Even if you're using last survey, having these linked records won't impact that at all. Is there a linked maintenance report function available? Not yet. This is kind of our first foray into providing more context to your inspections and maintenance. Just kind of speaks to the direction we're going with this feature. There's a lot of stuff that we can do around this, but the initial piece was making sure that we got everything linked together and we were showing you all of the pertinent information. We wanted to kind of lay this groundwork first before we expand on it. If you have any ideas about how we can expand on the feature, feel free to submit them to our ideas website, which is what you can see right here, ideas.aiworldwide.com. Me, as well as all of the other product managers, check that ideas portal regularly, and we'll respond to your comments and more than likely reach out if we have questions to try and figure out exactly what your need is, so that what we develop is actually meeting it. Are there any changes to calculated fields in version 2.0, or is it the same as 1.x? It's the same as 1.x. We didn't add anything new to the calculated field engine. In 1.14, we did some work like the add days and add years and add months. Some of those weren't actually in the calculation expression editor, but in 2.0, we didn't change it. So all of your historic calculated fields are going to be compatible with version 2.0. Yeah, so the next question is, can you explain the image attachment feature? So what that is typically you use the Allegro, and I can flip back to PCS and give you a better demonstration of what that looks like. Okay, so in PCS 1.13, actually, we included these fields for image management. And what that enables you to do is with an Allegro QX, or even like your phone or digital camera, it lets you go in and take a picture and assign it to an inspection. So really it's easiest to do with the Allegro QX because it has the integrated camera, and you can send this facility inspection images field to the Allegro and capture the inspections while you're in the field, and they automatically get brought in. But if you happen to use a digital camera or your phone, you can also come into PCS here and click the little pencil icon, which is our edit icon, to get into the image management editor window. And here you can see any pictures that you had. So there's no limit to the number of pictures. You may have 5 or 6. You can just drag and drop them into this section. I don't have any more pictures to drop in here. But so you could drag and drop them. You could click add files and browse to your pictures folder and add them that way. You can give them a different name if you wanted to. We can also make images primary. What primary means is really it's for like reporting purposes for the most part. It lets you choose the main image that you want to send over to your form reports if you want to visualize that. And also with other systems. And so we have these image fields not only for inspections, we also have them for the facility level. If we look over here, so what these facility images would really be for is to establish for atmospherics at least, is to establish a baseline. So if I come up to a valve and it's newly painted or newly installed, I know when I take a picture of it, that becomes a baseline image that I can always refer back to figure out exactly if my atmospheric corrosion is good, fair, or poor, or however you guys are actually documenting the condition of your atmospheric facilities. It makes it a lot more objective. In the past, when you didn't have images, or they were buried in a folder or on a shared drive somewhere, they were hard to get to. When you look at a data grid and it just says good or fair, you don't really know what that means. And it could be different from person to person. So this really objectifies the evaluation of your visual inspections to make them really more trustworthy. All right. Is there a charge to upgrade to version 2.0? No, there's not a charge to upgrade to 2.0 if you're already on PCS Access. If you're coming from version 7, you would have to go through the upgrade process, which is where we actually get your version 7 database to our professional services group, and they upgrade it for you and then deliver it back. And typically, you know, they'll train you how to use it as well. But for people who are already on Access, you can definitely upgrade it at no cost. If you're interested in upgrading, give sales a call. Your sales representatives, Steve Hamlin, Jim O'Connor, even our in-sales rep, Brad Weir, can help out as well. Can we show examples of Spatializer? We can do that in a different webinar. I think that's a great example of a different webinar. We only have 8 minutes left. I don't think we have time to do it justice, but I'll note that, and we can do that in a future webinar to make sure that you guys have a good understanding of where we're going from a data visualization standpoint, and how we can help aggregate your data and make it even more actionable by viewing it on a map or using charts and dashboards. All right, y'all, I'll give you back 8 minutes of your life. Really appreciate everybody joining in. Hope you all have a great day.